and Pagaset people. I'd like to turn it over to Jamil so you can open the ceremony for us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the SCSU community. I'd like to welcome you all here. Thank you for joining the State of Social Justice at Southern Connecticut State University. And this is our first town hall discussion. First, my name is Jamel Hart. I am a senior communication major, and I'm one of the students on the activism committee. We thought it was extremely important as students to check in with our university to see where we are at with our social justice progress and to hear from you all as students about any questions you may have regarding this. What are some ideas you may have for us as a community? What are some principles you want us to follow? And X, Y, and Z. So we're extremely excited to hear from you all and to discuss where we have made progress and where we should be going in the future. As a community, students, we are a huge part and our voices need to be heard. So thank you all for all the students who have contributed their questions and their concerns. And thank you to all the panelists who are joining us today. So we will begin.
I guess that's me, huh? Thank you, Jamel. It's very nice to have everyone here today. I am delighted. I want to thank Diane and our student activism committee for helping to pull this together today. In case you don't know who I am, I'm Joe Bertolino. I am the president of Southern Connecticut State University. Sorry, Diane, I thought you were introducing me. So it all works out. It's good. As you can probably guess, we have a lot to talk about today. We have a lot to share today. And those of us that are in leadership positions in particular here at the university, our job is to listen and to learn and then to provide the support and the resources necessary to act. I think that I hope this afternoon that the team will share with you what we have accomplished over the course of the last 3 years, because I know that it's easy to get frustrated and to see certain things happen and other things not happen and then assume that nothing is happening. But I'm here to tell you that actually isn't true. A lot of folks have worked very hard and we have done some very good work. But certainly there's much more to do. And my hope today is that our staff on the panel will be able to share with you what we have done, what we need to do, and where we are going in our journey as a social justice institution. I'm very proud of the work to date, but in particular, I'm really proud of our students. I have to say that this student group, the Student Activism Committee, our multicultural student organizations, and all of the students who came together most recently for this semester's rally, I have never been prouder of the work, the energy, and quite frankly, I think it's good that you push us as administrators. I think that's important, and I encourage you to continue to do so. Know that we know that there's much work to do, and my hope is that Diane, as our new Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and others that work with her will help us to move in the right direction. And so today, you will have an opportunity to hear from some of the staff. I'll have an opportunity to sit back and listen, and then we will all have an opportunity to ask and answer some questions. So with that, I think I'm turning it over to
Diane.
Diane, very good. So thank you very, very much.
Well, again, good afternoon. Buenas tardes. You know my name, you know my title. I am so honored to be moderating today's panel discussion on the state of social justice at SCSU. And, you know, I have to say, I haven't been here that long, a little over 4 months, and who's counting? But in my relationships, and just in the little short time that I've been here, I've been so privileged. And I say that over and over again. I'm so privileged to be working with so many faculty, staff, and students that are true champions, committed to advancing the work around social justice, anti-racism, anti-oppression. And I think we all recognize that there's a lot of more work to be done, and but that's okay, you know, as long as we just are true to the work that has to be done. And so I'm really excited and again privileged to be part of that community, or this community. Before I introduce our panelists, I know everybody's been thanking the Student Activism Committee, but I need to do a special shout out to all of you. And you've heard from some of the students already, but you know, really their work in this COVID climate, where they were able to pull off the Black Lives Matter protest early this semester, as well as earlier this month, the Get Out the Vote teach-in, and then here we are today. I also would be remiss and I should take a special moment to really thank some individuals who have been doing this work for a long time. So it's not a first, but certainly have been working very closely with this committee. And those are special thank yous to Diane Brown Albert, and also Dr. Tyree, because they have mentored, they have supported, and their continued dedication, I mean, it just shows up over and over again, particularly with our students. Our program today, as some of you know, will begin with each panelist from their particular lens and role on campus, providing an overview of the current work in progress, as well as our limitations and how are we going to do better work. Then Sarah Gossman, class of 22, president of SGA, will also be joining in the conversation and offer some comments and reflections with the work that they are doing and what's to come. Based on the questions that we gathered from the Student Activism Committee, as well as many students on campus, we will have an opportunity to engage our panelists in a Q&A, followed by closing remarks from Madison Alexis, graduating class of 22. So with that, I am going to introduce the panelists, and I have to say there's a lot I could say about each of them, but that would take the whole event. So what I'm going to do is just introduce each of them, their title, and then they will follow up with their 5 to 7 minute presentation. So I'll begin with Vice President for Student Affairs, Dr. Tracy Tyree, followed by VP for Academic Affairs, Dr. Bob Prasant, Vice President for Enrollment Management, Ms. Julie Edstrom, Chair of the Faculty Senate and Professor of Communication Disorders and Co-Director of Judaic Studies, Dr. Deb Weiss, Associate Professor of Secondary English Education and Co-Chair of SCSU's Undergraduate Curriculum Forum, Dr. Meredith Sinclair, Associate Vice President and Dean of Students, Dr. Jules Tetraw, and President of SGA, Sarah Gossman, class of 22. So with that, I'll have you, Dr. Tyree, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Ariza. Hi there, my name is Tracy Tyree. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I have so much to say. I'm going to really try to focus and not talk too quickly. It is exciting to be here and have a few minutes to talk about what we have accomplished and to think about what the work is that still needs to be done. I just want to quickly say these are highlights. It's not all inclusive. I'm a little concerned my team might be listening and I'm going to forget something that they would really like to have been highlighted. So I just acknowledge that it is not everything, but it is some highlights and that it reflects significant partnerships. For those that are not familiar, student affairs really encompasses the out of class experience of students. And it's everything from the residence halls and the student center to our well-being, health and well-being, to athletics. I mean, it's just the gamut of the student experience, as will be illuminated in some of the things that I choose to talk about. I thought to start, I imagine some people on the call who have been here with us for more than 2 years and were at the university when we had a difficult incident on campus, a racial related incident on campus. And out of that came a list of student solutions. This was in February of 2018. And it was a list of things that we were asked to really especially pay attention to. And I thought it would be important to give a little bit of a student affairs update on those things that relate to our work. Just quickly, one was around the resident advisor position and wanting it to be more appealing and accessible to students of color. And so I thought I would share that this fall, approximately 70% of our resident advisors identify as persons of color or BIPOC students. 78% of our other student employees and residence life identify as BIPOC, and 68% of our professional staff identify as such. And so I don't know out of comparison. I think we had some pretty good numbers back in 2018, but I thought it would be helpful to know kind of where we've come in that journey. There was a strong request for how we emphasize training and education. And so I just wanted to highlight the addition of a cultural awareness and competency committee in the division that has done a significant amount of training for both our divisional staff as well as student leaders around cultural awareness. We have a professional development committee that has hosted all student affairs, which is about 150 people, training around understanding first-gen students, better understanding gender identity, Latinx students, college student mental health, and Gen Z. So really expanding our knowledge and understanding of the students with whom we work. We this summer initiated an anti-racist white ally training to help members of the division who were interested in how to be stronger anti-racist white allies. We have then each department is engaged in training and education, and we've incorporated much more training and education throughout New Al Weekend, throughout our student leader training, and through our RA programming and training. There was a request to expand the Multicultural Center, and I wanted to name our multicultural liaisons that we began a year and a half ago, in which we brought 3 faculty members through course release time into the Multicultural Center to expand the reach and services of the Multicultural Center. And through that, we have really enhanced through Diane Brown Albert's leadership, and then work with the multicultural liaisons. We've launched the diversity peer educators as paid leadership roles on campus. And some of our student participants today are diversity peer educators. And as well, we added a multicultural student lounge. So those are some of the things that were asked for that we have done in the last couple years. And then there was an emphasis, again, just related to student affairs, on staff diversity. And so we have really focused on how position descriptions, search committees, and our search processes attract and then we recruit a larger number of staff of color. And so that's just specific to the list of student solutions, because we're often asked about that or thought perhaps to have forgotten about it. So I wanted you to know that we haven't forgotten about it. Additionally, a few other initiatives I'd like to highlight include our new model of undergraduate advising, which is really intended to touch every student in a meaningful way to increase their ability to progress to their degree and graduate. We, under the leadership of Katie D'Oliveira, we have a $2.2 million grant, federal grant that that focuses on the retention through collaborative high impact practices, and again is really supporting the success of every student, and allows for additional coaching and intervention and work around food insecurity that Dr. Tatro will talk about shortly. We added the position of coordinator of multicultural counseling because we knew and understood that our counseling services needed to students needed to see themselves in our counseling center staff. We still have a ton of work to do there, but we welcomed that position and that work there. We have a fairly new initiative from the Summer Athletes Fighting Injustice, where our athletic student leadership and staff are really looking to the ways in which athletes better understand and contribute to our fight around injustice work. Our University Access Program has really expanded their touch to better support New Haven Promise Scholars, Gear Up students, first generation students. They successfully secured, under the leadership of Dr. Wright, $450,000 in a state grant to promote academic success among students of color who earn below a 2.0 GPA. With the Office of International Education, launched study abroad opportunities for our students that work with the University Access Program staff, and have launched a new initiative through a Campus Compact Vista program to work with families to support their role in supporting our student success. We really have focused on LGBTQ plus inclusion, especially through the SAGE Center, and increased our access to gender inclusive housing, increased our number of gender inclusive restrooms designated throughout campus and each residence hall, have done a clothing closet that is out of the SAGE Center, as well as Institute of Lavender graduation, just a few highlighted programs to focus better on the ways we support our LGBTQ student community. And then we've just done a whole lot of individual outreach and support, including early and alert initiatives, why those feeling forums, stress and coping support, drop-in counseling support, pilot programs around 5th and 11th week interventions, etc. And then through RA training that focuses on how to have more effective conversations and interventions with students. Finally, I'd like to highlight, just from an institutional lens, a little bit of the work that I have had the opportunity to lead or engage in. We, a few years ago, instituted the Campus Climate Survey for faculty and staff, and a separate one for students, and have continued to address the work that has been named through those survey results. We launched social justice grants and a social justice recognition program, again, all through the President's Commission. We launched support for undocumented students through our Dreamers Action Alliance, and I want to call out Esteban Garcia and Raisha Cardone and a team that work in that do that work together to really support students who identify as undocumented. We, with Paula Rice and I, collaborated with some colleagues to offer Undoing Racism training a couple years ago that really led to work of our Racial and Intersectional Justice Group, which is faculty and staff who are very focused on activism and I forget the, I'm kind of blanking on a word I'm looking for, but to really help our faculty and staff bring to light work around racism, anti-racist work, and intersectional justice. And then last year launched a white accountability group for faculty and staff who identify as white to work more in partnership around anti-racist work. Just a few things I want to name as work in progress. We have so much work to do. So while we are celebrating some of what we've accomplished, it always just feels like a drop in the bucket of what needs to happen. I know that the Student Solutions list named dance team rehearsal space, and we have truly tried to expand that, but it is a constant work in progress because space is our greatest, our scarcest resource when we want to expand things. So we're still working on that. Still looking for additional space or considering additional space for the Multicultural Center, as well as funding and staff needs that they continue to have. Still working to focus more on gender identity inclusiveness, including expanding our gender inclusive restrooms across campus. We did slightly expand our prayer and meditation space, but it is not large enough. And so we have really worked to identify more space for to dedicate to our students around their spiritual needs and religious identity. We need more data to inform our decisions, to be sure that we're investing our resources, time, energy, human, money resources to the things that make a difference. And so I acknowledge that we need to do more informed by data. We still have students that fall through the cracks. And so I feel like we have a ton of work to do to reach every student, to be sure that their needs are addressed. And we need to continue to look at ways that we can increase our resources both through external support, whether that's giving or grants or other external opportunities, but also assessing the allocation of our current resources to ensure that they reflect these values and they really elevate the work that we say is important to us. And I'd like to close with an acknowledgement that we always have more learning, knowing, growing, and capacity building to do. We are never there. And so in the Division of Student Affairs, I commit that we will continue to expand what we know and understand so we can expand the ways in which we make a positive impact on the students that we show up to work to serve and support every day. So I don't know how much time that was. It was probably too long, but I'll stop there. I look forward to the question and answer opportunities.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tyree.
So am I self-introducing here?
No, I can introduce you again.
No, that's okay. I can do this. I can do this. I've got the technology. Bob Present. I am the Vice President for Academic Affairs and the Provost here at Southern Connecticut State University. And I want to also share my thanks to the Student Activism Committee and Risa and all the other folks who put this important program together. Just a hint of a background in terms of where I'm coming from in my comments. I've been a faculty member, a department chair, a dean, and now provost on 5 different university campuses. And I have never been on a campus so focused and so determined and so motivated to wear a social justice banner as Southern tries to do. And the work has been intense. It's been ongoing in every area. Our faculty, our staffing, and on and on. So I'm honored and proud to be here. We have been very purposeful, as I just alluded to, in growing the diversity of our students. A campus student body now that really pretty well reflects our regional communities. Dr. Tyree just mentioned she feels we need more data, and she's right. We always need to collect data, but as President Bertolino might share with you, as a scientist, I like data. I can't resist sharing data, so you're going to be getting some data from me. That's very important and I think very, very telling. Let's stay with our students first, our student enrollment. We have about 9,000 or so students here at Southern right now. Over 1,200 are Hispanic or Latino. About 1,600 are Black or African American. Almost 300 are Asian. In total, about 38% of our student population are students of color, 38%. And really telling, last year, and I believe I'm correct here, last year, for the first time, over 50% of our incoming class were students of color. That's a pretty successful path. I know there's been, I'm going to go back and forth from data, from what we're doing that seems to be working, but I'm going to share with you some of the challenges also that we're facing. And I know there's been some conversation and some concern about possible differentials in retention numbers. The question is, are students of color leaving our university at a higher rate than others? When you look at the data, it really doesn't pan out. And we're pretty proud of this. We're not done yet, but our retention rates across all of our student body seems fairly comparable, with one exception that I'll share with you. Overall, what we call our fall to fall retention is 76.9%. Let's round it up to 77%. That's overall average. The largest difference in retention is actually male to female. Our male students are retained fall to fall retention at 73%. Our female students at 82.3%. Almost a 10% spread between male and female here. This is an important difference that we really do need more data and a better understanding of. Let's compare students a little differently. Our white students in a fall to fall retention rate are retained at an average of 77%. So it's about the university-wide average, 77%. Black and African American students are retained fall to fall at a retention rate of 75.1%, Hispanic and Latino students at 75.8%. It's less than a 2% spread, and it is not statistically significant, and that's the good news. What's more important, though, is taking a look at these numbers and what they mean if we look at it over a longer period of time. Let's take a look at a 5-year spread, a 5-year retention for students, a fall to fall retention rate. The overall average for the university is 74.7%, so almost 75%. For male students, it sits at 73%, and again, for female students, it's 82% today. That 73% for male students has not budged in 5 years. That's of concern. Female students went from 5 years ago, a retention rate of 75% year to year, fall to fall, to 82%. That's a significant upward trend, obviously. White students, very small increase from 74 to 77%. Black and African American students retained a 75% retention rate, while Hispanic and Latino students, it was a bit of a roller coaster. We don't fully understand, but we have to examine. If you look at the retention rate, fall to fall only, we're talking about, it went from about 68% to 76%, but there was a high in there of 79% in 2016. So it's a mixed bag. And while we have the data, we really have to better understand what it means. So we're coming up a little short there. The numbers are good, but we could do better. And we're trying to put some new programs in place. You heard Dr. Tyree talk about several programs that are very important. These are particularly important in retention and recruitment. The Gear Up program was a very important program. All the programs that support our students are important, but we have some new ones that we're working on now. So I want to spend a minute just looking forward. Recently, we joined with Housatonic Community College in seeking a Lewis B. Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation in the Sciences grant from the National Science Foundation. That's going to be under review very shortly. It is designed to drive students from Housatonic Community College, in this sense, students of color, to the STEM disciplines, ensuring they're successful and ensuring they enroll in a 4-year school, and hopefully Southern is that school for those students. The most important point of it is retention and graduation. Similarly, next year we are going to independently submit what's called an LSAMP, the Louis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation proposal, for our own Nutmeg State program. We'll go into that in partnership with the other 3 CSUs, the Connecticut State Universities. And the goal there is to, again, increase numbers and retention of students of color who are heading into the STEM disciplines. These are very important federally funded programs that would help us. I've been involved in these programs in the past. In fact, I've been involved in 3 of these in the past, and they are very successful programs. We're also looking at deepening our partnerships with Gateway, Norwalk, and Naugatuck Valley Community College to set up enhanced pipelines of students of color to Southern. What's really important is not just recruitment and retention, it's why the students would come here and what's holding them here in terms of the programs we offer academically. So our faculty have worked really hard to develop programs and courses that focus on diversity, inclusion, and social justice. And if you just take a look at the curriculum that we're offering now, it's an amazing array of established courses across many departments. I'm going to give you a sprinkling right now, just a couple of courses that are involved in environmental justice, U.S. Black history, contemporary anti-Semitism, Hispanic Caribbean colonization, gender, media, culture, race, and ethnicity in American politics, racial and intersectional justice, women and gender in society, men's studies, social inequality in the US, criminal justice and social inequality, feminist theories. It goes on and on and on. We really have an incredible menu. And in fact, we have a new minor in the works right now on racial and intersectional justice studies. So that's pretty exciting. Plus, if you go back a year or two, the Southern Racial Justice Pedagogy Project helped create a syllabus for racial justice that includes how we move beyond diversity and start learning how we teach for racial justice and how we embed anti-racist curriculum into each discipline. Add to the mix the many, many programs and workshops that we've seen that focus on social justice, some that our students have put together, others our staff and faculty. And we're really pretty proud of what we've accomplished so far. But as Dr. Tyree said, we are far from being done. We come up short in, and I want to speak to it for a moment. And that is in having a faculty that reflects the diversity that we seek. A diversity more relevant or more aligned, I should say, with our student body and the community. We're far from unique here. We're not the only ones who have that issue. This has been an issue that has grown decade after decade after decade. It's been a long time in the making. Many, probably most universities with a history similar to Southern's reflect the same shortcoming. It's getting better, time consuming, and it's not going fast enough. So right now, if we look at the data, Southern has about 22 to 23% full-time faculty of color. That's about 103 individual faculty members from underrepresented groups. Now, this is an important number because it is part of an upward trend. Just 5 years ago, we were at 17%. That was about 72 faculty. So we've gone from 72 to 103. We're not there yet. Similarly, our very important part-time faculty, our faculty of color, have grown from 15 to 20% in the same time period. So the trending is right, but not there yet. To answer the question ahead of time, in part, I think, how do we work to better balance our faculty representation? I'll just give you a brief overview here that our searches for faculty and administrators are very purposeful here. There's specific advertising that goes out to outlets such as Hispanic Outlook and diverse issues in higher education. But more importantly, it's direct outreach. And we spend time reaching out to institutions that have a strong history of creating a diverse pool of doctoral candidates who are destined for a career in the academy, in a university setting. We reach out to HBCUs as a pipeline to our faculty. Really, most importantly, we also spend time with our search committees to help educate them about the array of strengths brought in candidates that are not the norm of what we've historically looked for. Word qualified has a very different meaning today. And it's about a redefinition of the word qualified. We can make easy arguments for our lack of diversity among our faculty because we are trying to measure candidates across an old measuring stick. How many publications, how much teaching they've done, but there are other high quality characteristics we have to look at. So we have to stretch our definitions from previous practice to include the acceptance of strengths of what an individual brings from their individual background, their real world knowledge, what they might bring from an industry background or a clinical practice. It's not just an academic background per se. What is offered to our students? That again is offering a definition in a wider, more equitable realm. With all of that said, let me wrap up here. Uh, I want to extract, it was really timely. There was an article in the New York Times literally today. It was an opinion piece by Benjamin Fong from Arizona State University. And he wrote about teaching racial justice. And he said that teaching racial justice is not racial justice. Teaching racial justice is not racial justice. In the academy, in a university setting, in our universities, we feel really good about all of the relevant curriculum and all the workshops and all the panel discussions that we offer. But that's about a voice. It's not an action. It's a voice. In his words, and I'll quote, a university is a place where real life political orientations are taken up and grappled with. It's that grappling we have to do. We have to land in a post-grappling academic society, if you will. He reminds us, and I'll quote again, for all their intractability, racism and other forms of oppression are not static features of American society. That is, not static features. Change is happening. Change will continue to happen, but we have to make it happen. So all in all, we've made progress. We're not quite there yet. We will not stop trying. And I assure you, all of your ideas are welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bob Prasad. Thank you. Next, Ms. Julie Edstrom. And I just wanted to say, I know that we know that there's a lot of good information being shared right now. As the moderator and timekeeper, I'm just trying to be mindful of time. So as we're looking at our comments, we just want to be conscious of not shortening the Q&A as we're going through, even though I know everything we're saying is critical and important. Julie, thanks.
Thank you, Diane, and good afternoon, everyone. I will also briefly highlight some things happening in the Enrollment Management Division. Enrollment management includes admissions, the Office of the Registrar, financial aid, and we work closely with our partner departments in Wintergreen to deliver student services. So we've especially focused on some things that we can be doing to improve our equitability in our processes and admissions and financial aid. So I'll talk mostly about that. Yeah, I would also mention that we have a very diverse staff in the Enrollment Management Division. So I'm pleased that we're able to have staff who can connect with students. Students can see people who have similar identities to them and feel more comfortable with talking about things like paying for college as a result. We've worked a lot on reducing hurdles to accessing an education at Southern. So the application process, the college decision-making process can be very cumbersome. It can be very stressful. We're especially seeing that right now in light of the pandemic. We know that across the various high schools who are our partners, some of them have fewer resources in terms of school counseling or other things to support the college search process. So we have really tried to increase our service to the community as far as information sessions about paying for college. How does the financial aid process work? Helping families complete the FAFSA. Things that don't necessarily have to do with persuading them to come to Southern, but just serving as a resource. I think that's actually something that's true of the profession of financial aid and admissions, and we certainly try to live up to that. We've looked at the process of applying and all the components. Here at Southern, we use, for our first year students, we use the Common App. We are a member of the Common App organization, which has an advantage of if you're a high school student thinking about various colleges, you can fill out the Common application and have that information sent with the click of a button to a number of different schools, as opposed to having to fill out separate applications for each school. However, the Common App is pretty long and cumbersome. If those of you who are listening who are students remember going through that process recently, it's a lot of questions, it's a lot of elements. So we're working on creating an alternative application that would be just a Southern specific application that would take just a few minutes for students to complete and give us the essential information to get the process started. We eliminated last year letters of recommendation. It's a time-consuming effort that puts a lot of stress on applicants and puts a lot of stress on their high school teachers and counselors. It doesn't give us a whole lot of new information to decide whether a student can be successful at Southern. So we thought, why force everyone to go through that effort? We still we'll take a look at those if students submit it, but we eliminated that as a piece of the process. Test optional has been a theme this year across higher education. We've been talking here at Southern about moving away from using ACT and SAT test scores in our consideration of students for admission for a while now. And of course, the pandemic forced us to deal with that this year, which is a good thing. Our intention is that that's going to be a long-term policy at Southern, because we know that test scores don't always reflect a student's ability to be successful, particularly among underserved populations, low income, first generation students of color. So we're going to be taking more of a look at high school achievement. And we also have done a lot of work in the admissions staff this year regarding what we call holistic review, meaning we're looking at your application and thinking about each student in terms of their whole story. So it's not just a GPA, it's what's the pattern of courses you've taken, where are you coming from, what's your family circumstances, what have been some obstacles that you have overcome that give us a sense of your ability to be successful. And then in terms of financial aid, we also have done a great deal of work in thinking about the equity impact of our policies. So when I first arrived at Southern about a little more than a year ago, there was a practice of essentially, we have a limited amount of financial aid resources. Of course, we would love to have more. We certainly are working with our partners in advancement in the foundation to continue to develop scholarship opportunities to increase that funding. But working with the resources that we have right now, we at least want to make sure we're distributing that in a way that is equitable and has the highest number of students able to be supported in attending Southern. So instead of awarding on a first come, first served basis, so we just award aid until it runs out, and then after that, students don't have access. We've shifted the way we distribute aid so that throughout the whole enrollment cycle, we have aid that we are able to offer according to the student's greatest need. So we hope that over time we're going to continue to make that a more effective process, along with hoping that we'll get additional financial aid resources. We also have really worked on how we share information with students about getting through the business of being a student. So kind of back to thinking about the Wintergreen Student Services. We have a student service task force right now that has representatives from each of the Wintergreen service areas, really thinking through how do students get information on the website? How can we simplify? How can we make more clear? There's always a certain amount of bureaucracy associated with, there's forms to fill out and processes that have to be followed. But can we make that as straightforward as we can? And can we eliminate anything that's unnecessary or redundant in those processes? So those are just a few highlights. I'm proud of the commitment the enrollment division has to looking at everything we do in new ways, and also listening to students. I think we'd be very excited to work with student government, with the social activism committee, to get input into ways that we can improve and make the student experience better, and also make sure that we make the path to a Southern education as accessible as we can.
I'm sorry, I think I was on mute. We we have our next professors, Professor Weiss and Professor Sinclair, speaking around the curriculum and the role of faculty senate. So take it away, Dr. Weiss.
Okay, yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's great to see you all here today. I'm Deb Weiss. I'm the president of the Faculty Senate, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about the efforts that have been made on the part of the Faculty Senate. I feel fortunate that I think, have been a little bit ahead of the curve on this. And I'm going to share my screen with you. I'm going to show you a brief PowerPoint presentation just to illustrate. I think it'll be easier for you to follow if I do that. So, okay, hopefully everyone is able to see that screen now. And I just like to tell you about a committee, a task force that was formed several years ago. It was called the Curricular Task Force on Social Justice and Human Diversity. And it was an initiative of the Faculty Senate and the administration. It was formed in the fall of 2018. And the reason that it was formed was in response to concerns that we were hearing from students and from colleagues. The committee was a very large committee. It had more than 18 members, and it included students, members of the UCF Steering Committee, Faculty Senate Executive Committee members, and others. And the committee met twice per month for a period of about a year and a half, which is quite significant. The focus of the conversations were about the meaning of social justice and human diversity. So just people discussing what do these terms mean? What does it mean to be a social justice university? What is human diversity? And what does it mean for the way we teach and learn as a university? The committee presented recommendations to the faculty and to the SGA. Maybe some of you were even here. Maybe some students were even here at that time that they presented. And there was a faculty survey that was completed at the time. That survey, I'm sorry, I'm having a little difficulty here, indicated that approximately 65% of faculty reported that they use culturally responsive, anti-racist, and or other inclusive pedagogies in their teaching. The goal of the committee was they were trying to foster an inclusive thinking about social justice and human diversity in our teaching and our learning. And some of the measures that they discussed in order to arrive at this were self-designation of social justice courses, holding teaching workshops on racial and social justice, providing internships for social justice and human diversity initiatives, and convening public forums and university-wide events on those topics. Regarding the social justice courses, as these were discussed, the goal was to assist students in learning about social justice and human diversity, learning about diverse cultures, religions, social identities, disabilities, and being able to study examples of oppression and iniquity in order to rectify injustices, but also to celebrate diversity, which is key as well. And the teaching model that was discussed was an awareness, knowledge, action teaching approach in which first students are made aware of social justice and human diversity issues, and then they develop a deeper knowledge about the issues in order to ultimately be able to take action on these issues. Some important components for that the committee, that the task force stressed, was that it would be necessary to provide funding support for faculty who were interested in developing these courses, and also to recruit new faculty in order to increase our diversity. In April of 2019, the Faculty Senate endorsed through a resolution the task force recommendations and called on the university to provide the necessary support for implementation of these recommendations. And at that time, the initiative was turned over to the Undergraduate Curriculum Forum for the next steps. And this will be my segue to introduce Dr. Meredith Sinclair, who will follow up with what the initiatives have been for the Undergraduate Curriculum Forum to follow up on the Senate's resolution.
Thank you, Professor Weiss.
Thank you. So I am currently the co-chair of the Undergraduate Curriculum Forum, which, as the name suggests, is the faculty body at Southern that is in charge of sort of processing curriculum. So for students who aren't aware of how curriculum works at Southern, courses and programs are generated by faculty and departments, and then those go through the UCF. The exception to that is the LEP, which is governed by the UCF. So we did take up the recommendation from the ad hoc committee last spring and considered creating an SJD designation. But sort of out of that conversation came two issues that we're still working on. So one of those is that we don't really want to reduce this idea of teaching for justice to just a checkbox on the degree evaluation. And so the concern was, if we simply created a requirement or created a designation, that it would be really a surface nod to what it means to have curriculum that is justice oriented. So instead, right now, there are a couple of things that are happening. One is actually the minor that the provost mentioned earlier is coming forward. And I want to point out that that minor for racial intersectional justice is not just a quote unquote diversity minor, but is really something that moves beyond diversity and is really interested in examining systemic racism, the way that oppression operates, naming power, and then also moving us to activism. What do we do in response to those things? So that is, I think, a shift from previous curricular efforts. We also have an initiative coming through to sort of fast track courses that are responsive to things that are happening in the world. So the curricular process can be kind of slow, and there's a mechanism that allows faculty to teach special topics courses. That's something that already exists, which means if something happens and faculty want to try a new course, they can do that very quickly. But that previously has not been possible in the LEP, so soon that will be possible. And as an example of the kinds of courses that can come out of that, this spring we have a course on abolition, activism, and reform, and another on society and the pandemic. And those are just two of a number of courses that are immediately addressing things that are happening right now in the world. It is worth noting that even without curricular revision, that faculty are always updating their courses. And so we recognize that we have a problem where a lot of courses are doing justice work, but they aren't necessarily obvious as justice courses. And the provost alluded to this as well, that we really need to do a better job of highlighting those courses. Even with all of this work happening, we still have a lot to do. We need to continue to work on both how our curriculum itself becomes more just, but then also how we support student learning around justice issues. And I think the biggest barrier that we face right now that faculty have really been wrestling with is, what do we mean when we say a curriculum that is for social justice, right? So curriculum is the stuff that we teach. What does it mean for that to be justice oriented? And these are conversations that faculty have been having over the last few years. A lot of faculty development, faculty forums have been devoted to those, including one that we had just last Friday, actually. But there's still a lot of learning to do. Another sort of big problem is that we have a strong and growing group of faculty who are deeply involved in this work on campus, but we need to get everyone involved in that conversation. There are some folks who still worry that this work is too political, that it's too political to talk about being a social justice institution, much less having a social justice oriented curriculum. But those of us that are invested in tackling systemic racism and oppression within the university, which is an institution, which means it has those issues happening, recognize that teaching is always a political activity because we're either always working to maintain the status quo, maintain things as they are, or we are working to dismantle those oppressive systems. And curriculum is just one piece of that. So clearly we have a lot of conversation to continue, but I am optimistic and excited about the energy that is on campus and certainly the energy that is coming from students pushing us for this change.
Thank you.
Great, I think, hi everyone, I'm Jules Tatro, I'm the Associate Vice President, Dean of Students, and I think I wrap up this segment before we get into the most important piece, which is your questions and answers. And so I'm gonna try and go really quickly. I've been given the 2-minute warning already, so we'll get this going as quick as possible. Since I arrived here about a little over 6 years ago, I've focused really on meeting with students and listening and learning from them and their experiences, and most importantly, how complex their lives are, in particular around basic needs and securities, food insecurity, shelter insecurity, and others. And so I'm going to focus my comments on that. I think we've accomplished a lot over the last couple of years, and certainly, as everybody else has alluded to, there is lots to go. Some of the things we've accomplished over the last few years is we've moved our Student Support Foundation funds directly into the Dean's office to be able to provide direct support to students. And last fiscal year, we gave out about $96,000 in student support for those emergent needs. We've expanded textbook assistance program, giving out upwards of $25,000 over the last 3 semesters. And we've begun to develop our partnerships with local organizations such as Youth Continuum, DCF, and the Y2Y organization. Many of you know we've developed and launched the Swipe It Forward meal donation program. We have received over 386 meals donated from students, 160 meals supported by the Dean of Students office. And so that program is going relatively well. And in fact, this semester, we've had 157 meal donations since you can now do it just online at Hulu. We created the vision for the Opportunity Center to really think about holistic wraparound services for students, in particular around basic needs. We kicked much of that off around the 125th anniversary gala, which was focused on food insecurity and raised upwards of over $125,000. We were able to train the staff in the Dean of Students office to be able to certify homelessness for students for financial aid purposes. And that allowed us to really support our housing insecure students through the financial aid process. We're working with our colleagues over in enrollment management. And one of the most exciting things, 3 weeks ago, we finally opened our food pantry in Wintergreen, and it was really through the dedication of the community where we were able to stock it, fully stock it, and get volunteers. And we've had over 75 patrons in the last 3 weeks with the opening of that center. As I indicated, we have much to do still. We have some other accomplishments, but in time, I want to get to the things we have to do. We certainly have to continue to think about how we support our housing insecure students. We need to think about a more permanent process and approach to emergent housing programs and to fully connect with Y2I programs and youth shelter, college shelters that they're working on. We need to work in developing our relationships with our local feeder high schools and their homeless liaisons to help with to assist in the transition to higher education of our homeless youth so that we can connect them to supports and services earlier on. And we need to continue to build our relationships with other resources external. How do we develop connections with utility assistance program, help students with SNAP application process, connect with child subsidy programs, and so forth and so on. And then we need to think about having some dialogue and discussion about how do these basic needs and securities impact student success and progress? And, for example, how do university policies impact disproportionately these students? So how do we think about that? How do we involve that in the conversation? And how do we better educate our community around the services and supports that are available, and to work on identifying and connecting students to those services? I said a lot there in about, I don't know how many minutes, but I will stop there and turn it back to you, Diane, to get to questions and answers.
So Jules, before we get to, thank you all. Before we get to our Q&A, I'd like for Sarah to share a little bit about the work that SGA is doing and what's next.
Hello, everyone. I just want to be aware of the time, so I will be brief. So student government is the governing voice of the students now during the COVID pandemic. In a time of racial injustice, we just want to make sure all students feel represented on campus. Back in the spring semester, after the murder of George Floyd, SGA released a statement, and we realized our efforts need to be continual and not just a statement. So I'm just going to be going over some of the work that our boards have been doing over the semester and just some of the collaborative work that we've been doing. We've made a lot of progress this semester and have done a lot of collaborative work. We teamed up with the Student Activism Committee and allocated money to the Black Lives Matter March. We were collaborative in organized voter registration events. And here I'll just explain some of the board work that we have been doing. In the Board of Student Experience, the VP and members are discussing ways to partner, engage with multicultural clubs and organizations on campus. This way we can be a part of those conversations and be in the room to have a better understanding of the needs of students and best represent those students. In the Board of Academic Experience, we've discussed with the Director of Admissions and the Honors College Chair how to better diversify the Honors College program, as we saw that was a concern on the Black at Southern Instagram page. We've also discussed further research on open educational resources and lower textbook costs for students, as well as an SGA and MCC partnership in the future about the book loan program that's already established here at Southern. And the Board of Outreach and Communication, social media presence is extremely relevant now in a virtual world. We're all on social media. We've been using our social media platform to reach out to the students about elections, events, and to promote other events that have been going on around campus, especially multicultural events as well, especially during Social Justice Month. We promote our own meetings as well. We do Instagram Live events, any way to promote our presence and just make sure that students feel connected to us. Our meetings are Fridays 1 to 3. They're open to the public. And we've recently just created a form so students can contact us if they are unavailable to attend those meetings. It's in the form of a link tree. So this link tree has a link to our WebEx meetings. They have a link so students could fill out the concerns, but they also have a link to anti-racist educational resources so students can inform themselves as well. So we're very proud of the work that we have been doing, but like just to echo everyone else, it's just the start. We're ready for the next semester. We're wrapping up our fall semester work, but we're ready to come in strong in the spring. We've been listening to everybody on the panel, and we're definitely taking note, and we're ready to come in strong for the spring semester. So I'm just happy I could be here. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So now we get to the Q&A section. Again, these are questions that came from not just the activism committee, but also we were able to collect those from other students. So I'm going to start with President Joe, if you're ready. So one of the questions that came up, with sadness that Dr. Jermaine Wright left our campus, there is a sense that there now is a lack of color, members of color in the president's cabinet and administration. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. I can certainly appreciate and understand that concern, and it is not, and it is certainly not inaccurate. I think it is a valid concern. I mean, let's be candid. If you look at the panelists today, um, it is just look at the panelists today. Uh, the everyone except for all of the executives, with the exception of, well, Diane, yourself, are Caucasian, white, including our faculty. So I am very cognizant of what that means, the message that it sends, um, and the concern that it brings to the table. Um, so what I can share with you is this: that at the moment we do not have any openings on at the cabinet level, at the vice president's level. However, um, a couple of years back, I had made a promise that I would hire a vice president for diversity, equity, and inclusion. That is a new position, and that is a significant um, that is a significant investment. In addition to that, however, because beyond the cabinet, um, I do think it's important to note that we have actually hired a lot of administrators of color in the last 2 years, mostly at the director's level, and some at the associate dean level. So I do think that we've seen an uptick in the number of administrators that we are hiring, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a lot more work to do, um, in this regard. So my hope is, and Diane, you and I have talked about this. One of the things, and the provost also mentioned this, one of our goals is, with the assistance of Diane and Paula Rice and others, that we will be able to improve in our recruitment and retention of diverse personnel at all levels, with a particular emphasis on faculty and on director and higher level um, administrative positions. I do think that as positions become vacant, and that happens pretty regularly due to retirements and other, I anticipate that opportunities will present themselves for us to be aggressive, quite frankly, in our recruitment of more diverse candidates. You should know that the provost and I have discussed at length this very issue, and that um, as it relates to searches, we we will not allow certain searches to move forward unless unless the search committee meets certain thresholds in the search process for attempting to bring in a diverse pool of candidates and to hire diverse candidates. So I hope that helps a bit.
Yes, absolutely. There's another follow-up question, and I probably could have said this, addressed it to anyone on the panel, but I've heard this over and over again since I've been on campus, and it's the resource question. It's the resource question for everyone, but it in how do we so the question is, how are we increasing university department budgets to match the growing demand of social justice work like the multicultural center and university access programs?
This is very interesting, because I think there is a perception that that we haven't made certain investments, or that we may not be investing enough. Um, you recall that earlier, I think it was earlier this week, there was a session from a guest Victor, and I can't Victor Ray, was it?
Yes, yes.
Um, and I attended that session, and I asked a single question, and that was, if you could give the president any advice, what would it be? And he said, very simply, um, provide resources. Fair enough. So there, let me tell you what we have done. First, you've heard a lot of things about accomplishments from the different vice presidents and deans and faculty members today, um, and those initiatives add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars in investments. Sometimes you see those, sometimes you may not see those, because there's a lot that happens behind the scenes. But I think that's the first thing I want to say. Secondly, it is true that particularly during this time period, that Southern has roughly a $25 million deficit for this year. However, that doesn't mean that we cut social justice initiatives or that we don't invest in social justice. In fact, and Diane and I have talked about this, there is so much going on related to social justice on our campus, and so many program initiatives, etc., that they're all happening individually in individual departments, individual clubs, etc. And so there is probably some redundancy in what is happening, but everyone is spending time and money on all of these things. And my guess is that if we were to pull together and assess everything that we're doing and all the dollars that have been spent as a collective, it would probably come out to at least $100,000+. Now, I would argue that we have resources, we just haven't spent them and utilized them in the way we should. So if various areas of the university are willing to let go of some control, um, then I think that we could pull those resources together as a collective. We would be able to see what the staffing and the dollar amounts are, and then from there, we could repurpose accordingly, so that we could meet the needs of the Office of Multicultural Affairs, our multicultural clubs and organizations, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to cut something else in order to achieve what we want to achieve. My position is that I think the resources are already there. We just have to find them and organize them. And Diane's been given the wonderful Diane and our chief financial officer, Mark Brzezinski, have been given that task.
Yes. Before I move on, I lied. Thank you for that. Before I move on to the other panelists, there was that actually a few burning questions around the role of our police. And it's interesting because some of them were very specific to, we don't see, they're here, but in light of all the racial trauma, Black Lives Matters movement, there is some concern on our campus, at least by some of the students, that university police. So one of the questions is, how are university police ensuring that they are not over criminalizing students of color? And the follow-up to that is, how are university police training officers on racial injustice? If you could share a few minutes around that, that would be great.
I think that's a great question. First of all, our students and our community should be very proud of our police department. They are highly trained, they are highly skilled. They are led by a wonderful chief. And I've worked at a lot of places, and I can tell you that um, I'm able to put my head on the pillow late at night knowing that our community is safe. Um, what folks may not realize is that our police department is one of the most diverse departments at the entire institution. It is a highly diverse unit. a number of the officers and the detectives, they have a lived experience as individuals of color, with a large African American and Latinx um, workforce. Um, and I think it's also important to understand that when we talk about criminal activity, that's actually very minimal here at the university. Most of the quote unquote criminal activity we have is in the form of is usually alcohol related and in the form of thefts. And so most of that doesn't involve our police department at all. Initially, it might, but more often than not, our our Office of Student Conduct and our residence life staff are the ones that are dealing with those circumstances. And quite frankly, I have not looked at the demographics of the cases, but I'm pretty certain that it's there's a good chance that the vast majority of the students um, that fall into the category would probably be white or Caucasian students, because the majority of the students who live on campus um, are white and Caucasian students. But that's I can't say that for certain, but that is my guess. Having said that, I do think it's important for our students in our community to know and understand the training that our police officers have. I mean, um, there is Connecticut has a police accountability bill that was passed by the state, and almost everything in that legislation Southern was already doing. In addition to that, Chief Dooley and the police department are very much into community policing. That has been their focus, and some of the trainings that they've been engaged in, like the Building Bridges program, which talks about the history of racism and identifying and understanding forms of racism and bias and dialogue, etc. And also the fair and impartial policing training. So that training and that education is ongoing. In fact, I would argue again, besides being one of the most diverse uh, uh, areas of the institution, it is probably also uh, one of the areas that is most trained um, in the area of social justice and racial inequality.
Thank you, President Joe. I know as I'm looking at time, we do have a couple, a few minutes for a couple of more questions before we close with our student. But I'd like to redirect the conversation to Dr. Tyree. And again, one question that, you know, when we talk about retention, and it was really nice to hear the provost talk about our underrepresented students are not doing as bad as we think, at least year to year. And you shared some other data. We also know that climate matters, and the perception of our experience in different spaces. So there was mention about the Blacks at Southern, and that a lot of comments that were made about still feeling not connected to the community, still feeling racism, and we know it continues to exist. Can you say a little bit more about that, which we've been excited about, to hear these students feeling comfortable to share their concerns, but how do we bring those narratives to a place of next steps, so that they're feeling that they're feeling that they belong, they feel like they're part of that community? Can you say more about that page and what we've learned from that?
I will. And I'd like to just say to President, if I could, in response to President Joe's, about 52% of our residential students identify as BIPOC. So we actually have, including those who identify as two or more races. And so just wanted to share that, because I know that was a question that you had posed. So yes, we do. The question I think in part was, do we pay attention to the Black at Southern page? And a whole lot of us do. Like I go back and look at it. I'm not a super great at Instagram, but I go back at it and take a look at it on a regular basis to see what has been added. I really have reflected on, it is like you say, Dr. Riza, it's about climate and culture in lots of ways. It's about peer culture. It's about the culture in the classroom. It's about social culture. It's about systemic issues. And that's where it feels like, in lots of ways, uh, the work that we're doing to train our student leaders in terms of how do they inform and influence the peer culture, particularly in the residential experience, because that's an immersion experience that our students are having. And the Res Life staff, I could go through this, but it would take too much time, but they have really increased their training both at the professional staff level and the RA level as to how to create community that has a sense of belonging for all students to feel like they belong. We do a lot of work in the co-curriculum, in the out of class experience with clubs and organizations, leaders, with some of our other leadership groups, even thinking about how do we train our orientation ambassadors and create a new student experience that as we're welcoming students to the university, what are we welcoming them to? How do we help them see themselves in the university experience that we're creating? How do we name and create spaces and programs that suggest to the students that that this is the place for you? But then it has to be a lived experience. It can't just be a named experience. It really has to be the way that students navigate the university, the ways that we identify and provide resources one student at a time in terms of connecting them, helping our students address acts of racism or bias when they happen. That's part of the activist work, or that it's not just reactive. We need to be more proactive and understanding and thinking about how we how students feel connected and know how to access resources. It does that. I will say there were some posts related to our athletic community, and that's another place that in fact, in part, Athletes Fighting Injustice came out of, in part, some of those comments themselves that named the athletic climate and what we need to be doing better in terms of students feeling like they're marginalized or feeling like they are representative on their sports teams, but not seeing as many people that look like them as they would like. And so we've been talking a lot about that in athletics. So I think it takes a village. It takes all of us to be mindful, to be to grow and understand and increase our own sense of our place in the community, and then how we create, how we are creating spaces and messages and connections that help students feel like they matter and belong for in all the identities that they bring to their university experience.
Thank you. There's been quite a bit of activity in our feed, in our chat, and one that I'd like to highlight, and then we probably have to close. And it would be a brief, as I'm looking at us being close to the hour, and I'm not sure who to address this to, but one of our, and this came from the comment of the Black Lives Matter rally. And the question was, how do we think about this march and all that was said? Was that only performative, or are we really serious about the stuff that we're going to be doing, the next steps after that? So I don't know, President Joe, if you want to address that, but does SCSU match, again, are we performative, or are we committed, and what's happening after the Black Lives Matter protest?
Well, I don't think we'd be here if we weren't doing anything after the Black Lives Matter protest. I think after the rally, we wouldn't be engaging in these conversations. We would simply like others just let it pass, and that just isn't the case. I also think that the 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 things that you've heard today, in terms of the action steps that we have made throughout the course of the last several years, there's a significant amount there, and I think we have a sense of what we need to do moving forward, and we're going to keep doing. We're gonna do what we need to do. I'm not quite sure how else to answer that. Diane, you may want to speak to that a bit more in terms of your own role, but I don't know if that helps. But
Yeah, no,
no, we're
definitely.
not. We're this isn't a performance. As I shared, um, this is it's personal to me. Um, given my own family and the fact that I have multiracial grandchildren, um, and a son of color, that this is very personal, and so it's certainly not performance.
Thank you. Uh, again, what's so very real is that we have more work to do. We probably have more town halls to do. But I want to have this one more question before we really close, and I think it's very telling. And Jules, if you could, we we talk about the racism, bias, and let me go back to it. The question is, if Southern is an aspiring social justice school, what are some aspiring consequences to implement for those who don't abide by our social justice standards? Wow, that's a powerful question.
Yeah, it certainly is. Absolutely, Diane. And um, when I think about it, I think about it in two different ways. Just my first reaction to that is, um, there are things in which we, I believe, as an institution, won't tolerate, right? There are things that, such as abuse and threats and harassment, intimidation, violence, and especially those things that in particular, those things that are motivated by hate. Certainly we can't stand for, and we need to act on, and we need to address them and hold accountable, and we need to think about also as we do that, what restorative methods or restorative actions we can also include as part of that process, right? But I also think sometimes there's another area that's related to this. It's a little bit more gray. And that has to, and is typically sometimes more difficult, actually, to navigate. And those are the things that, may not be aligned with our values, or, I don't know, speech that might be offensive to us. And this is where I think the community has to own some responsibility here. In particular, to not let it go unaddressed, right? We need to be able and prepared to have some deliberative dialogue where there are differences, right? The diversity of thought, the free exchange of ideas, right? The bedrock of higher education, the bedrock of our institution. We need to acknowledge that and understand each of our individual role in that. And I would say that it is extremely important during these times that we are recognizing even more so and committing even more so to our values, particularly of civility, respect, and compassion. Because this, I believe, actually is where we have an opportunity to create the biggest change. Right?
Yes.
Here is the opportunity, if we join together deliberately and intentionally as a community, to be able to respectfully share each other's values and challenge each other's values. That's where we actually have bigger impact as a community. But at the same time, we can't tolerate behaviors that are, harassing and intimidating and threatening, and in particular that are motivated by hate.
Thank you. So we are down to the hour. I want to thank every panelist, President Joe, the students, the committee, And Madison, if you could lead us with closing remarks, and you only have less than a minute, if you can do that.
Yeah. So again, my name is Madison. I'm one of the student activists, a part of the student activism community, and I go by she, her, hers. I first want to start by saying thank you to the people who just participated in our Q&A for the answers that we were received from the panelists. I'd also like to thank the panelists for taking the times out of their day to participate in this town hall. As we all know, these topics don't fit snugly into everyday language, but they're necessary given the climate of our country. We live in a time where racism has been pacified with phrases about remaining colorblind, and where topics that address race and discrimination teeter on controversial. The educational institutions we live in and learn in are just growths of this system that was meant to disadvantage marginalized groups. And the current curriculum is created to conceal by creating a discourse that appeals to equality but fails to look like equity. Southern as a social justice school doesn't mean that is exempt from the exceptions of systemic racism. You know, we are plagued by a history of biases and prejudices too that we all have to work to remedy out. All of us as active members of the community, we all find it paramount to do our duty and implement change as we see it and as it's needed. Today is just another example of our recurring efforts to move ourselves forward. Hopefully this dialogue would stick with us all and serve as a reminder that we can no longer stand in the long line of issues that are waiting to be addressed. We cannot sit and hope we are not picked last, but we must stand in the front and bold and firm voice tell the world that we are up next. So again, I want to thank everyone who attended this event, and yeah.
Thank you, Madison. To all of you, thank you. And if anybody would like to stick around to just debrief, we can do that just briefly if you have a little bit of time.
Thank you, everyone.